The next morning, the mansion felt unusually quiet, as if the previous night's confrontation had cast a long shadow over everything. Amara couldn't shake the tension from her mind. Adrian's warning echoed in her ears. If you're going to keep playing this role, you'll have to deal with women like them. The memory of the actress and the two other women, their cruel words and judgmental stares, burned in her mind. It was clear that being in Adrian's world came with dangerous territory, and not just because of Adrian himself. The women in his life were just as ruthless, determined to tear apart anyone who even remotely threatened their hold on him. Amara stood in the hallway, staring down the corridor that led to Adrian's office. She was supposed to meet him to discuss the next event, but every step she took toward that door made her heart race with anxiety. When she finally reached his office, she hesitated for a moment before knocking. The door opened almost immediately, and Adrian's cold eyes locked onto hers. He looked the same as always, calm, composed, and unreadable. But there was something different about the way he held himself, as if he was guarding something. "Come in," he said curtly, turning back toward his desk. Amara stepped inside, feeling the weight of the conversation that was about to take place. She could sense that last night's events had left Adrian just as unsettled, though he would never admit it. "I didn't expect things to escalate like they did," she said cautiously as she took a seat. Adrian didn't respond immediately. Instead, he sat down behind his desk, his fingers tapping rhythmically against the wood. "You've seen firsthand what happens when you get too close to me," he said finally, his voice measured but cold. "This is why I warned you not to get involved." "I didn't ask for any of this," Amara replied, her frustration creeping into her tone. "I didn't choose to be part of your world, Adrian. You dragged me into it." Adrian's eyes flicked up to meet hers, and for a brief moment, something softened in his gaze. "You're right," he admitted quietly. "But it's too late now. They're watching you. Every move you make. They want to see you fail."
"Why?"
"Because I'm not one of them?" she asked, incredulous. "Because you're with me," he corrected, his voice darkening. "And that's enough to make you a target." Amara fell silent, the weight of his words settling heavily on her shoulders. She had never wanted this attention. All she had wanted was to repay her family's debt and get out of this mansion. But now, she was caught in a web she didn't know how to escape from. Adrian leaned forward slightly, his eyes narrowing. "You need to be smarter, Amara. You're not just my house help anymore. People are starting to talk, to wonder why you're with me. I'm not the kind of man who stays attached to one person for long." Her chest tightened at his words. She knew his reputation. He was the playboy who never committed, the man who cycled through women like they were accessories. But his words made it sound as though she was part of some performance he was putting on for the world. "I'm not pretending to be with you," she said, her voice hardening. "This was your idea. You wanted me to accompany you to these events. And now you see why," he replied sharply. "This world isn't kind to outsiders, especially not ones who don't fit in." Before Amara could respond, Adrian's phone buzzed on the desk. He glanced at the screen and frowned. "I have to take this," he said, standing up. "Wait here." He stepped out of the office, leaving Amara alone with her thoughts. She exhaled shakily, the tension in the room suffocating. How had her life spiraled so far out of control? One moment, she was just a house help, cleaning floors and doing her best to stay invisible. Now, she was at the center of a game she didn't understand, a game where Adrian held all the cards, and she was just a piece to be moved. Her eyes wandered around the office, and for the first time, she allowed herself to look at the photos on Adrian's desk. There were a few of him with important business figures, but one in particular caught her eye. It was an older photo, one she hadn't noticed before. Adrian standing beside a woman she didn't recognize. The woman was beautiful, her smile wide and genuine, and Adrian's expression was different. Softer. More real. Who is she? Amara leaned closer. Her curiosity piqued. Adrian never talked about his personal life, at least not in any meaningful way. She had assumed he was all business, all charm and no depth. But this photo suggested otherwise. Before she could dwell on it further, the door to the office swung open again, and Adrian stepped back in, his expression tight. "We have to leave," he said abruptly. "Now." "Why?" "What's going on?" Amara asked, alarmed by the sudden urgency in his voice. "There's been a change of plans," he replied, already gathering his things. "The client we were supposed to meet today has moved up the schedule. We need to go to the hotel immediately." Amara's heart raced as she stood up. Something about the way Adrian was acting didn't sit right with her. It was almost as if he was trying to avoid something, or someone. The car ride to the hotel was tense, with neither of them speaking much. Adrian kept checking his phone, his jaw clenched in frustration. Amara couldn't help but feel like something else was going on, something he wasn't telling her. When they finally arrived at the luxurious hotel, Adrian led her through the lobby and toward the private meeting room where the client was waiting. But just as they approached, Amara noticed a familiar figure standing by the entrance. The actress. Her heart sank. The woman hadn't just been furious last night. She had been planning something. And now, here she was, waiting for them with a look of triumph in her eyes. "Well, well, well," the actress said, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "Look who's here." Amara's stomach twisted with dread. She glanced at Adrian, but his face was a mask of indifference, though his eyes flashed with annoyance. "This isn't the time," he said flatly. "Oh, I think it is," the actress replied, taking a step closer. "Your little associate has caused quite the stir, Adrian. People are starting to wonder if she's more than just a business partner." Amara's heart pounded in her chest. She could feel the weight of the actress's words pressing down on her, but she didn't know how to respond. It was clear that this woman wasn't going to let things go easily. Adrian's expression hardened. "We're done here. Leave." The actress's smile widened, a glint of malice in her eyes. "You can't just push me aside, Adrian. Not this time. People are talking, and they're asking questions. You don't want this to blow up in your face, do you?" Adrian didn't reply, but Amara could see the tension in his jaw, the way his fists clenched at his sides. He was losing control of the situation, and the actress knew it. Before Amara could even process what was happening, the actress turned to her, her gaze piercing. "You think he cares about you? You think you're special because he's parading you around at these events? You're nothing, just like the rest of us were." Amara felt a sharp pang in her chest. The words stung more than she wanted to admit. She had never deluded herself into thinking she was important to Adrian, but hearing it said out loud, in such a cruel way, was like a slap to the face. The actress's eyes gleamed with satisfaction. Soon enough, he'll toss you aside too, and you'll see that you're just another one of his playthings. Amara's pulse quickened as the weight of the actress's words settled over her. She knew she couldn't trust Adrian, but was she truly nothing more than a pawn? And just as she was about to respond, a voice came from behind. Someone unexpected, someone who would make everything much more complicated. Amara, what are you doing here? Amara turned, her breath catching in her throat as she saw who it was. Someone from her past, someone who shouldn't be there, standing in the middle of Adrian's world. Amara's breath caught in her throat as her eyes locked onto the man standing a few feet away. Time seemed to freeze. She could barely comprehend it. Someone from her past here, in the middle of Adrian's high-powered, glamorous world. Standing before her was Liam, the man she had once trusted, a close friend who had disappeared when her family's financial troubles had escalated. His presence was jarring, his familiar face a stark contrast to the tension swirling around her and Adrian. How was he here? Amara? Liam repeated, his brow furrowing in confusion as he took a step closer. His eyes flicked between her and Adrian, the disbelief in his voice clear. What are you doing here? Amara struggled to find her words, her heart pounding in her chest. What was Liam doing here? Why now? She hadn't seen him in over a year, not since her family had fallen apart and she had taken this position in Adrian's mansion. The questions piled up, but the actress standing beside her broke the silence first. And who might this be? The actress asked, her tone mocking, but her eyes flicked to Liam with curiosity. She seemed to revel in the unfolding drama. Adrian, too, had stiffened. His gaze narrowed as he studied Liam, his expression hard and untrusting. The air between them crackled with tension, but Adrian kept his distance, his silence unnerving. Liam, Amara finally managed to say, her voice strained. I didn't expect to see you here. Liam's eyes softened slightly, concern flickering across his face. I didn't expect to see you here either. Last I heard, you were, well, dealing with your family's situation. And now you're with Adrian Blackwood? Amara's stomach twisted. She could see the judgment in his eyes, the unspoken questions swirling between them. She had no idea how to explain it, how to tell him that she was stuck in this dangerous game, trapped by her family's debt and Adrian's control. The last thing she needed was Liam making assumptions, especially in front of Adrian. But before she could respond, Adrian stepped forward, his voice cold and controlled. This is a private conversation. I suggest you leave. Liam's expression hardened, his posture straightening. Not until Amara tells me what's going on. Adrian's eyes darkened, his voice low and threatening. This isn't your business. For a moment, it looked like Liam might back down. But then he turned to Amara, ignoring Adrian's thinly veiled threat. Amara, are you okay? Is everything all right? The concern in Liam's voice shook her. She hadn't heard that tone in so long. Someone genuinely caring for her, asking her how she was. But now wasn't the time for that. Not here, not in front of Adrian. "I'm fine, Liam," she said, her voice firmer than she felt. "You don't need to worry about me." But Liam didn't seem convinced. He glanced between her and Adrian again, suspicion clouding his gaze. "Are you sure? Because this doesn't seem like you." Amara felt her pulse quicken. She knew what Liam was implying, and the last thing she wanted was for him to provoke Adrian. She had seen what Adrian was capable of when he was angry, and this was not the time to push him. "I'm fine," she repeated, her voice more urgent now. "Really? You don't need to get involved." Adrian's jaw clenched, and Amara could feel the tension radiating off him. He wasn't the kind of man to tolerate interruptions or challenges, especially not in his world. Before Liam could respond, Adrian stepped closer, his cold gaze fixed on Amara. "We have a meeting to attend," he said, his voice low but commanding. "This conversation is over." Liam looked like he wanted to argue, but Amara quickly nodded, hoping to defuse the situation. "Liam, it's okay. We'll talk later, all right?" Liam's eyes softened, but he still seemed reluctant to leave. "Amara, later," she insisted, her voice firm. "I promise." After a long, tense moment, Liam finally nodded, though he didn't look happy about it.
"Fine.
But we're not done with this conversation." He shot one last glare in Adrian's direction before turning and walking away, leaving Amara and Adrian alone with the actress still watching them, a smirk playing on her lips. Adrian's expression remained cold as he turned his attention to Amara. "You know him?" Amara nodded, though her throat felt tight. "We were friends a long time ago, before everything." Adrian's eyes narrowed, his voice cold and clipped.
"Friends."
"Right." The insinuation in his voice stung, and Amara's frustration flared. "I don't owe you an explanation for my past." Adrian's gaze hardened. "No, but you owe me your loyalty. And if you're going to let people like him interfere." He wasn't interfering. Amara shot back, unable to hold back the frustration any longer. He was just concerned. Adrian's eyes flashed with something dangerous. Concerned? Or is there something more I should know about? Amara's chest tightened with anger. This wasn't about Liam. This was about Adrian's control, about his need to keep everyone in his life on a leash. She wasn't going to let him turn this into something it wasn't. Before she could respond, the actress let out a dramatic sigh, clearly enjoying the tension. "Well, this has been fascinating," she drawled, her eyes gleaming with satisfaction. "But I think it's time for me to make my exit. Good luck, Amara. You're going to need it." She turned and walked away, leaving Amara and Adrian standing in the hallway, the silence between them thick and suffocating. Later that evening, Amara sat alone in her room, her mind racing. She couldn't stop thinking about Liam's sudden appearance. It had been so long since she had seen him, and his concern for her had stirred up emotions she had buried a long time ago. He had been a constant in her life before everything had fallen apart, and now, here he was, standing in the middle of Adrian's world, asking questions she couldn't answer. But more than that, she couldn't ignore Adrian's reaction. the possessiveness in his tone, the way he had immediately assumed something more was going on between her and Liam. It was unsettling. And it wasn't just about Liam. It was about control. Adrian couldn't stand the idea of someone else stepping into his territory. Amara exhaled shakily, running a hand through her hair. She needed to stay focused. This was a dangerous game she was playing, and every move counted. But with Adrian's jealousy simmering beneath the surface and Liam's sudden reappearance, the stakes were rising faster than she could handle. Just as she was about to lie down, a knock sounded at her door. She froze, her heart racing. Slowly, she stood and opened the door, only to find Adrian standing there, his expression unreadable. "We need to talk," he said, his voice low but firm. Amara swallowed hard, stepping aside to let him in. She could feel the tension crackling in the air as Adrian closed the door behind him. "What do you want?" she asked, trying to keep her voice steady. Adrian's eyes bore into hers, his expression cold. "I don't like surprises, Amara. And Liam? He's a surprise." Amara crossed her arms, feeling her frustration flare again. "He's just a friend. Why are you making this into something it's not?" Adrian stepped closer, his voice dropping dangerously low. "Because I don't trust anyone in my world who isn't under my control. And right now, Liam isn't." Amara stared at him, disbelief washing over her. "You're trying to control me? I'm trying to protect you." Adrian shot back, his eyes flashing with something she couldn't quite place. But Amara wasn't convinced. She knew this wasn't about protection. This was about power. Adrian couldn't stand the idea of someone else stepping into his carefully constructed life. "I don't need your protection," she said firmly, meeting his gaze head-on. "And I won't let you dictate who I can and can't talk to." Adrian's jaw clenched, but he didn't respond immediately. The silence between them stretched on, thick and tense. Then, just as Amara was about to speak again, Adrian took a step forward, closing the distance between them. His voice dropped to a near whisper. "You're in my world now, Amara. And in my world, people don't just walk away." The intensity in his gaze sent a shiver down her spine, but before she could react, Adrian's phone buzzed again. He glanced at it, his expression hardening. "We're not finished here," he said quietly before turning and walking out of the room, leaving Amara standing alone, her heart racing as she realized that things between them had just crossed a dangerous line, and there was no turning back.